Hello, Jane. How are you?
Hello, Andrew. Good to see you again. How are you?
And you too. And you too. So, gosh, yes. How have you been, first of all?
I've been great. Thank you so much. And I'm so excited about this one because this is almost like going back to basic. This is like what we maybe should have done from the beginning.
We have given ourselves a big one, and I can almost see the quizzical looks on people's faces. So, guys, we are breaking out of our 1990s fixation because we are doing the classic Indiana Jones movies from the 1980s. So we get to span the decade because if I remember right, Jane, did Raiders of the Lost Ark was released in 1981, and
81.
very yeah, and very neatly, the third movie, The Last Crusade, comes out in 1989. So we're in the 80s, guys. We've not broken into the 90s this time.
But
Uh,
what a decade that was, and what a trilogy. We've decided we're doing the first three Indiana Jones movies because they kind of go together a little bit. And we know there are others, but we're just kind of forgetting a little bit about them for this one. Because the first three ones, I think, were probably the ones that really turned the character and the entire universe of Indiana Jones into cult in movie history.
yes, and they did so very well because, if I'm not mistaken, all three movies, when they were released, were the highest grossing films that year. So they
Mhm.
were clearly doing something right with the Indiana Jones franchise then. And such amazing films. I mean, in terms, they were a huge part of my childhood almost
Yeah.
as soon as I was allowed to watch them. How about you, Jane? How old were you when you watched your first indie movie?
Oh, I must have been maybe around 10, 11, I think. And it was, I think what's easy to forget when you're watching something that has become a classic. We talked about this before, Andrew, for example, when we did Casablanca, is that you forget how new this was when it first came out. And this was not just another action movie because we've had action heroes before,
Mm.
but this was a very new take on a hero. This geeky hero who's a professor and an archaeologist. I mean, it doesn't get more geeky and nerdy than this. And then the hero who has a double life. We've seen before in a kind of Superman context as well. So he's a professor at daytime and a Nazi fighting hero at nighttime kind of thing. But this thing about knowledge being the superpower, that was very, very new. And I'm not sure that had really been seen before in action movies.
No, hardly ever. I mean, there were some older films where you would get a tough, muscular hero being paired up with a bright individual, and together they would get through the film. But no, I think you're right. In Indiana Jones is one of the first, and certainly the first really successful one, where you get a hero who combines absolutely everything. And played by Harrison Ford. So, it's Han Solo doing something else. What's not to like? And
Absolutely,
um,
absolutely. What could go wrong? And
no,
paired
indeed.
with, we mustn't forget the brilliant Steven Spielberg. I mean, this was a match made in heaven.
Yes, yes, it was. And although there were lots of writers involved, the common thread in the story generation is the equally amazing George Lucas. So it really is the
Yes.
dream team involved in these films, and I think it really, really shows that the late 70s throughout the 80s, they were really on a high.
Yeah. And
And
there was, Andrew, I think you mentioned it as well. There was something about this combination of combining science with with superstition and as part of your storyline, and at the same time, you have in a way a classical hero who can do all the fighting, who's also incredibly knowledgeable. Gotta say, he can read plaques just as he's finding them in the tombs. That's a skill I've never, as an archaeologist, achieved. I have to say that was amazing. That speaks a dozen languages at least, and especially the ancient ones. And I think the reason why we feel we are all we are always kind of engaged in his journey is because there is just enough to make us feel familiar with the culture or the situation, although most of, if not all of what we are watching is fiction. But we kind of get hints to well-known cultures along the way, well-known relics and artifacts and that kind of thing. So we kind of feel like we're in history, and at the same time, we're very much in a fictional world.
Yes, yes. It really builds on a lot of the really awesome parts of 1930s era pulp fiction, and the setting is just perfect, really. And as you say, we're always in familiar cities.
Yeah,
We know where we are, we're grounded, but there's just enough mystery in especially ancient dead
yeah.
civilizations that people will sort of know about, but maybe not know well enough that there's lots of room there for a writer to create these wonderful things. Yeah, because as a when I watched the films, I very much enjoyed the mystery element, especially when he went to places like Egypt and the more mysterious and romanticized parts of India, Northwest frontier
Yeah.
type stuff, and yeah, it's a beautiful balance in world creation, and I must say, in the movies, they really put so much effort into the little details that it just reinforces this feeling whether you're in Pankot Palace or in the ruins of Tanis or in Venice because I was the one I rewatched most recently, so no prizes for guessing which one that was, but yeah, you really get a feel for it.
And I think even in the even in the relics he's chasing as well, even in that when we see, and it's such a brief little sequence when he's chasing that cross of Coronado, again, something fictional, but created as a Christian relic with all of that adornment and jewelry thing going on. That could very well be something from a Christian church, ancient kind of relic. So there's always that element of something that's believable, something that's almost, oh, that's a real thing. Whether he goes to the Inca cultures or where, as you say, Venice, wherever he's going, even that Venice library, it's a beautiful place.
Yes, yes. I must confess, I did wince very slightly when he slammed the floorboard up because this is the only thing about Indiana Jones. His peculiar brand of archaeology is, shall I say, a tiny bit destructive.
Well, archaeologists do, we are destructive in what we do. Whenever we remove something from the earth and take it into a museum, we are effectively destroying it because we're taking it out of context. But I gotta say, he is more direct in his approach to destroying stuff. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think for me, the one where I really sort of there was a moment of, oh no, was when he finds the tomb of Sir Richard, and he
yeah.
reads the plaque there, and again brilliantly, just like he was reading it from a newspaper. I'm very impressed by his skills there. And then the rats come in because of the fire, the explosive, and he just turns the tomb around and sort of tosses it into the water, and you go, no, 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 don't do that, not good. Yeah, so yeah, there's that element, but yes, apart from that.
Apart from that, it's good. I mean, to be fair to Indy, a lot of the times this wanton destruction is forced on him by circumstances. Either he's triggered a booby trap, or or someone is trying to kill him. And I love that exchange where his dad, where he just go, "Oh, I think those people are trying to kill us." It's like, I know, happens to me all the time.
In fairness, that's never happened to me on an archaeological dig site. Never. I never dealt with that. But I do feel for, and this is why Sean Connery again, what a perfect cast he was. But again, he's portraying that exact feeling. He goes, "Oh, it breaks the heart," and he's standing there with that vase. Oh no, look, it breaks. Oh, thank God, it's a fake.
Oh yes, yes. Well, poor Indy's rubbing his head and going, "Oh, thanks, Dad."
Thanks for that. Well, every historian or archaeologist know that feeling. Oh, thank God I didn't destroy anything. Oh, thank God.
Oh, Yes, yeah. Yeah, yeah, all of us in the sector who work with artifacts, they always have that slight concern.
That
And
moment when you bring something out of the magazine and you have to put it into a glass display or something like that, that moment it needs to be moved. Everyone is just
yes.
holding their breath. You're just too
Mm.
not no, nobody moves a muscle
Mm.
as we do this.
No, that was certainly the case when when I was watching my last gallery installation, and that was a bit, yeah, heavy things too. It's like it's been fixed to the wall.
Yeah.
Now we let go, and this is all on trust.
Okay, we let go. We let go. It's definitely fixed. We let go. Everyone let go. Has everyone let go? Okay, it's there. It's still there. Yeah, that's interesting. That's an interesting moment. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, fortunately, most of what he ends up going after is fairly robust as
Yes.
artifacts goes.
Gotta say, he's chasing some robust ones there. But I also think I actually thought about this the other day that when I rewatched the Raiders of the Lost Ark, and having something like the Ark as your major theme in your very first movie, that's ambitious. Not only are you going for something that most people in most parts of the world will have heard about, that can be an
Mm.
advantage, but also a lot of people have feelings about this. Uh,
Yes.
and you may end up, ruffling a few feathers there. So that was ambitious and really brave at the same time, I felt. And the fact that we get to see it, we even get to see what's inside of it.
Yes, yes, the Holy of Holies has been well
Yeah,
and truly breached in that one. Yes, you're absolutely right, because I think both with the Ark and the Grail particularly, there were different concerns and issues with Temple of Doom,
yeah,
but with the two sort of Judeo-Christian artifacts, yes, it's I didn't appreciate it until later, but if you were very sensitive about these things, the idea that Nazis of all people would get their hands on the Ark and then open it, oh dear God. No, there was only one way they could have ended that film, and I think
well,
it.
actually, you mentioned the ending there, Andrew. I actually think this was new as well, because in a way, for our hero, this is a very unsatisfying ending. He doesn't know
Mm,
what's going to happen. What did you do with it? Who's on it? Where did you put it? What's happening to it? And then we see
yeah.
it hidden away, in a huge storage space somewhere, which is kind of the best place for it in a way. But
Yes.
for our hero, there is a sense of, this is not, we normally we see a hero, win the day and the girl and everything is well and he saved the planet and what have you. Now we see him walking down the staircase a bit sort of, okay.
Uh,
That was new as well, that type of ending.
Yes, yes, it was, and of course, I liked the way it left things open for the
Yeah,
possibility of more. Even though we never really got anything along that particular storyline, it left it on a nice cliffhanger, which is sort of a hallmark of this
yeah.
kind of film. Yeah, I had heard, I don't know if this is right, but apparently that final scene where he's walking down the steps with Marion and she's trying to cheer him up. Apparently, that wasn't in one of the final drafts of the film, so it would have been even more unsatisfying because if they'd not put that in, he would not only have, lost touch with the arc, he would have affected. Oh, they would have, what happened to Marion? The last you would have seen of her would have been on that island in the
Yeah,
Mediterranean, and then where's she gone? What's
yeah,
happened?
that
Has
is
Indy
true.
lost Marion again?
Yeah, that
Um,
is true. That is a good point. No, I think that scene was quite important because that
hmm.
meant, our hero got something out of this.
Yes, yes. If only to lose her again fairly rapidly, because
Yes.
they.
But true, true. No, but that open ending was brilliant as well. And in a way, it would have been kind of, I think people would have been disappointed if we hadn't opened the or seen the arc open somehow in the film. I think
Yeah.
after all that chasing and digging around, that would have been a bit sort of we're not even going to open it. But that scene must have demanded a lot of discussion on how are we going to do this, how
Oh,
what are we seeing, and how much should the viewer see in this?
Yes.
That
Yeah.
must have been quite a bit of a, yeah, I imagine.
No, and I think you're absolutely right because it is a tricky one because you there's so much strong belief attached to both the ark and what. Well, there's even that fairly well known story in the Bible of how one of there's a point where the ark is being moved. I think it's during David's reign,
Yes.
and the oxen stumbles, and one of the men by the side tries to steady the ark, but because he's not a Levite, because he's not one of the ordained priests, he's struck dead just for touching it,
Yeah.
because he's not pure enough in a sense. So whatever they were going to do to the villains that a bunch of Gentiles rocking up and getting their grubby hands all over it had to be suitably terrible and in a way the same with the Grail really when
Yeah. True.
Donovan decides at the last moment that he may have all the resources, financial resources of a Bruce Wayne and all the, ugly, militarily powerful friends in the world. But if you don't bring a historian along who's on your side, you're going to come unstuck in the end. But yeah, equally desecrating a key artifact. If I understood it right, I think all three of the Indiana Jones films had problems with. There was a debate about the ratings, weren't there? Because were they all in the US? Apparently, people said the ratings were pitched a bit low, and they were worried that children would be terrified by what they saw. Or
Well, there were some of those scenes were horrible, and I remember finding them a little bit scary at the time. I
yeah.
do remember the Donovan scene very well, and I think I didn't watch. I closed my eyes deliberately the next couple of times I watched that, because you see his skull and his eyes falling in and all of that kind of thing going on, and he's standing there holding on to her, and
Oh,
she's
poor Elsa. Yes, I mean
yeah.
I say poor Elsa, but you know what I mean.
Yes. But and that was scary. That was scary. And I also remember that what is he called, that leather clad Nazi in the Lost Ark,
Oh,
the one
the
with the
Gestapo
hands.
guy.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. No, the whole face
I
melting
think
thing.
Marianne is just calling him Max or Herr Max or something.
I can't remember his name. I
But
keep.
his eyes sort of falls in as well, and there's blood coming down. And I remember that being a little, don't like that. But luckily they're over very quick. I think
Yes.
the focus on that scene becomes, and both of those scenes actually, if we dare to compare, the arc scene there with the Holy Grail, uh, both of those scenes becomes about, what are you doing this for? Is it for your own kind of glory? Is it for the riches,
Mm,
the values? Is it for eternal life? Is it for ultimate power? What are you doing this for? And of course, at the end of the day, again, that knowledge is power kind of theme, that if you know how to handle this, and you know when to close your eyes, or which cup to choose and that kind of thing, you can walk away the hero here. But I think that the point of those two scenes were kind of the same in a way.
mm.
What is your point of doing this? Why do you want to open it? Why do you want to see? What do you try to achieve? What do you try to gain?
Yes, yes. And in some respects, I realize the Nazi characters wouldn't even think of this, but the very pertinent question of what even makes you think that these things would cooperate with you given your aims, it's like this is not going to happen, guys. Um, yeah, and I like that in different ways in both those films that Marcus Brody sounds a bit of a cautionary note when he's talking to
Yes.
Indy and about why are we doing it?
Yes.
We're the good guys, but why are we
Yeah.
doing it? And
Oh, he's such a wonderful character, because in many ways he's the voice of reason. And I like that voice of reason comes from the one character who is standing between cultures. I love that they've given him that, because he's the one who knows how to navigate different cultures all the time, and sort of introduces Indy into his world, and knows everyone, and kind of helps out. But I love that he's the one who's saying, I don't really like this, and if the Ark is there at Tanis, then it's something we are not meant to disturb.
Oh, Salah, yes, yes.
Oh,
He's the
Salah, yeah, yeah,
yeah, no, Salah is a wonderfully grounded character, and I mean, Rhys Davies did a beautiful job with him anyway. It's a
yeah,
wonderful actor. Yeah, yeah, Salah's the ultimate. I see him as a combination of all the highly talented, man on the ground that the hero knows throughout pulp
yeah,
literature, and they've decided to put it all into this one incredible figure. And for a character who's relatively minor, I also like how well-rounded he is. We see his family, we
yeah.
see him being the caring father, we see him being the resourceful adventurer, and
Yeah.
also he's just so funny. I love it when they have that argument in Raiders of the Lost Ark about the camels. I know camels, but Indy, the compensation for my brother-in-law's car.
Always and always, and also again the dynamic with him and Marcus Brody.
Oh, I
It's
love
just
that. I
that's
love
the
that scene.
comical duo in the making there.
Yeah, yeah. I love Brody to bits, and in a way, I am Brody. That got lost in his own museum not once but several times, and
You know
he'll
everything, Andrew,
blend in, disappear.
but you know everything.
Yeah, Brody is absolutely wonderful, and again another well played character. I think it was Denham Elliott. I'll have to check that, but I
Yeah,
think I
I think
think
you're right. I think you're right,
I think
actually.
it was Denham Elliott.
Yes,
And yeah, he just does wonderful things with that role. For someone who's quite understated and who doesn't really
yes.
play that much of he's very passive as a character. He gets shuffled around, sometimes quite roughly. Like, put Brody in the tank. Oh, okay.
But he does, and in a way, this is the good thing about that character. Well, as well, he does understand indie. He's the one who
Hmm.
does understand where that crazy passion comes from.
Yeah.
All
Yeah, he is.
confused.
Yeah. It's a shame I mean, I realize there couldn't possibly be a role for him or Salah really in Temple of Doom. But it's a pity that either they or their equivalents are not there because it's slightly the poorer of the three films for not having them alongside Indy. And
Yeah.
I know his dad wasn't there in Raiders of the Lost Ark, but Brody was.
Well, you are right actually, because I don't really want to rank them, the three movies, but I gotta say I did like the first and the third one the best. I feel a little bit like Temple of Doom is uh, just half a level below that, although it's a fantastic movie. Uh,
Yeah.
but it does lag a little bit in terms of those characters.
Yeah, I really like Temple of Doom. But yes, like you, I'd put it slightly behind the other two. And there were bits even when I was a child, because living in Malaysia, and you're very much aware of I mean, the Indian population in Malaysia didn't represent the whole of the subcontinent, but you growing up there, you'd know enough about it to know that they don't eat boiled snakes for dinner. And even as an 11-year-old watching that scene, I laughed because Willie's reaction to everything that's put in front of us, hilarious. But part of me was also thinking, are you screening this in India?
Yeah,
And apparently, I gather for a while, the Indian authorities were not very happy
no,
about Temple of
no.
Doom being shown, and I get that now. Now, interestingly, the actor who played the Prime Minister of Pankot, in an interview years later, he said that it was meant to be a bit of a joke, but it didn't land because, as he understood it, the joke was supposed to be, well, we know what ignorant Westerners think about us. So if they rock up anticipating that we're a people who eat bugs, we're going to damn well serve them bugs. But the joke did not land,
No,
and did not
no.
land quite catastrophically.
Yeah,
But I still laugh. I mean, I watch that scene now, and I think that's really funny,
it
especially
is.
when the soup arrives and Willie says, "Oh, thank God, something normal," and then all the eyeballs float.
And that dessert with the ice brain, monkey brain thing.
Ah, yes.
And
Dessert, chilled monkey brain.
then you have to lift the skull off first. It is No, no.
No, it's a very squirm in your seat scene, and
No,
yeah.
but it's brilliantly done. It's brilliantly done. But you're right there. It does balance something that's a little bit tricky because I think if of all the things that are fictional in the and most of it is in the Indiana Jones movies, but the two things that are actually true enough is, as we talked about, the Nazis' pursuit of ancient relics. Well, not perhaps the Ark and all of that, but they did do that. They did have a lot of search
Mhm.
for that kind of thing. The other thing, actually, that is based in truth is that Tuggy cult with the worshiping of Kali, and it was an extreme cult, and it was, very violent and brutal, not as we see it in the film, but it was a real cult. And I probably wouldn't be that fond of it being used in a movie if it was my culture. I probably wouldn't think it was representing my culture in the best possible way, because we all countries have mad periods or cultures or
Mm.
chapters in history that we are not particularly fond of or proud of
Yeah.
anyway. And this was an extreme one, but obviously for movie effect, the most extreme cultures always make the best villains in movies. And this one, as it was referred to in the movie, it was a real one, and it was not a pleasant one. And of course, it was not portrayed in the right way in the movie or in the historical correct context in the movie, but it did exist. And I think if you had been in India and watched this, there might have been, apart from the dinner scene, there would probably been various things you wouldn't have been too happy about there.
Yeah, well, I did get a chance years later to ask a friend of mine about it because although he'd grown up in Malaysia too, he is of Indian descent, and he said that it was the dinner scene that made him a bit more and the reason for that is his parents did know about. I mean, all in most Indians do know about the Thuggy and when you're kids, it's like the Europeans have their equivalent scary bedtime stories you tell to terrify children. So they all knew about them. They knew they were bad, and they took a very dim view of them generally. So in a sense, watching Indy carve his way through the Thuggee actually was not was no the a lot most Indians I know don't mind them being demonized because they but yes, it's always one you have to tread on very, very carefully because yes, they were still part of the culture, and you only ever see the Thuggee as well. You see the Thuggee and you see the Indian village, the fictitious village of Mayapur, and so you get those two views of Indian culture. But yes, the I thought it was quite brave of them to pick on the
Yeah.
Thuggee
I think
and
you're
to
probably
choose
right.
them.
It's probably the way the Germans feel about the Nazis. It's kind of
Yes,
all right to, yeah, pick them as villains. It's okay.
you go right ahead and bash them. We would too, and
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true. But there is another we talked about science and superstition there, Andrew. There's also that interesting balance of power versus knowledge, as well as the role of faith and belief. And that's a running theme throughout all three. I think that do you believe in this?
yeah,
And that's an interesting one because in a way that's a very religious way of thinking that you have to believe before this thing becomes real. So those,
yeah,
especially those three tests before he gets to the Grail, is very much a matter of belief just as much as it is a matter of knowledge. And again with the stones in the Tagi culture there and all of that and the worshipping of stones and so on, and even Indy begins by saying it's just a bedtime story, it's just silly superstition.
mm,
So there is this constant theme as well, balancing all movies about belief and faith and how much do you believe in.
Yes, yes, and I can see why none of the films really would, as far as I'm aware, don't really alienate religious audiences because they're actually quite faith underpinning because they convey this message that, you know, for all our scientific attainments and for all our perhaps sometimes cynical grounding in what we like to call the real world, there are always powers out there that we do not understand, and that, as Marcus says, you know, you're meddling with things you can't possibly comprehend. You
That's
know,
such a good
what
line. It's such a good.
it's a wonderful line, and yeah, it is a very strong theme in the films, and I quite like that it's there because only because I feel that it would be a very closed universe indeed if we understood everything and could explain everything. I like my mystery, and even if they're occasionally sometimes very deadly to the
Part
user.
of every religion in the world, every
Yeah,
mythology in the world, that there is a sense of mystery. There is a sense of there's something we don't know about and shouldn't know
yeah.
about. But it doesn't stop us from searching, you know.
No, no, and it's a wonderful comment about the human condition, especially when you look at Indy's character and why he goes for these things. I know there's that very slight element of that. I tell you what makes me uncomfortable and this is only because modern museum professional standards, that bit in Raiders of the Lost Ark where he goes at the end of the class to Marcus, I've got pieces, Marcus, lovely pieces. And Marcus goes, oh, yes, and the museum will buy them all, no questions asked. And I go, no, you need to fill out forms.
There needs to be questions.
There need to be questions. I mean, are these looted? Has anyone done due diligence? Oh my God. Oh, the 1930s were a very different place.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Oh, true, true. No, but it's also funny the light we are watching them in now, you know, and when we're watching also as professionals, you know, when we're watching these, and also how much you can get into them because I still get into them a
Mm,
lot. And you still go, you know, whenever he's ruining something or whenever he's turning that grave of Sir Richard around, I still go, no, no, no,
yeah.
don't.
Yeah, speaking of Sir Richard and his brothers, do you feel sorry for the last surviving Grail Knight?
Oh.
He's kept his house neat and tidy for the last 700 freaking years, and then Indy turns up and
And this whole thing just, and he's just standing there going,
yeah. I that always made me sad because when I look at the conversation he has with Indy, I get the sense that he felt his relief had arrived and that the shift
yes,
was going to
yes.
change. It's like, I'm free. I've got my life back. I can go and tell Loretta I can marry. Oh no, that was 700 years ago. Never mind, but I can go out and enjoy my life and see the world. And Indy's like, no, no, I'm not here to replace. I'm sorry, you're stuck here.
And I
Get it,
love
royal
that,
guard
oh God,
man.
that line as well. Oh, that was a poor choice.
Oh yes.
What?
Yeah.
That became apparent.
Well, do you know the wonderful subtlety that I totally missed as a child? I wasn't a very subtle child. You know that very significant look Elsa gives Indy when Donovan says, I'm not a historian. Which of these cups is it? And she gives him the ornate gold one and then makes eye contact. As a kid, I missed the significance of that. I now realize she basically murdered Donovan by giving
Yes.
him the wrong cup. And I just thought, ooh, that's, and
The
I'm
one
not sure how I feel about the knight not saying anything, but maybe that was the rules of engagement.
you felt a bit like he was probably bound by silence there. But you know, the wonderful thing about her character is that constantly in every scene you as the viewer have that feeling of is she actually on our side or not, or has she
Yeah,
turned even when you find out she's a Nazi, you kind of go, okay, maybe she's turning, maybe she's actually, yeah. And that was the wonder, and I actually think she played her really well. She was so very young when she got that role, but I actually think that was the brilliance of that character because yeah, we have a female lead, but she was constantly on that balance.
yeah. She is, I think, and I realize this will be controversial because Marion has so many fans out there, and actually so does Willie, to be fair. I rate her the best out of the female leads
Yeah,
in the three films because you're right, there is so much complexity and
yeah.
so much uncertainty behind what's going on there. And it does lead to one of the most deliciously awkward exchanges I've ever seen on screen. You know where I'm heading with this, right? How did you know she was a Nazi, Dad? She talks in her sleep. And just look at each other.
I was the next man.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, it was wonderful how totally unapologetic Henry Jones is about it. It's just like, well, I'm a human being.
That's the kind of, well, what would you have done? I mean,
Yeah.
no, that was brilliant. That was so brilliant, that scene. But no, but you're right. And I think that's why maybe that third one is probably the best in so many people's eyes, because that dynamic with Sean Connery. Oh God,
Yeah.
it was just brilliant. It was such a stroke of brilliance to get him in.
It was they gelled so well. I really had it was so believable, this, son and father who'd become so distant from one another. And again, really tight script writing because they
Yes.
give you, without overdoing it, they give you just enough to understand why their paths have diverged so
Yeah.
much. And and God bless Connery and Harrison. They just got that relationship down to a T.
And I
Um,
think the fact that when the father actually does something that helpful, it's kind of completely out of nowhere. I suddenly remembered my Charlemagne, and he takes out the and he just, no, not an action hero, but with knowledge, things sort of passes anyway.
Yeah, yeah. And they both still carry their fallibilities. I mean, what one thing I'm not a fan of is superheroes who are invulnerable. And I
Yeah,
love that Indy and his dad both have these very human failings.
that's
And
another
they
thing.
need,
That,
yeah.
yeah, you're right. That's another thing. Sorry, that just makes Indy a very, I think at the time, unusual hero, because we were used to heroes not bleeding. But all of a sudden, you have one who's not just a geeky professor, but he's also afraid of snakes.
Yes, yes. That's a wonderful thing. It's a nice foible to have. And they really play it up in Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's like,
Why does it have to be snakes? And that
and,
one,
and it's mirrored with the whole thing with his dad and rats. So even
yes,
though Henry doesn't come anywhere near a rat, it's yeah. All I can say is thank God Indy's not afraid of insects because in Temple of Doom they really go to town with the insects, don't they? Poor Willie. Because that was Kate Capshaw, well, Kate
yes,
Capshaw, Kathleen Spielberg, whatever you want to call her. I don't know how she feels about Bugs as an actress, but that was some pretty instead. I know my toes are curling just talking about it. That was some pretty heavy duty insectoid stuff they put her through.
I am not good with creepy crawlies, and the entire that very first scene in Raiders of the Lost Ark with the tarantulas down his back, I just
Yeah.
cannot. I think I screamed out loud. I just
It was a shocker. I remember the first time I saw that, it was bad enough watching Indy brush them off himself, but when he tells his assistant to turn around and the guy's back is just this crawling mass of them. Yeah, poor Sapito. Yeah.
no, 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 no. Oh, wasn't that a very young oh, what's his name? Oh, hang
He
on.
is somebody famous because
Molino, Alfred Molino. Is that
yes,
yes, that was a very young wasn't that him? I think it was.
I think you're right. Yes, yes.
Small role.
I know, poor guy. I mean, he okay, he had his failings, but I must say, in a party that proved to be very brittle in the end, he lasted the longest. And Belloc makes a good point. Indy, you really need to choose better friends sometimes.
He is really a wonderful character as well, Bella. Again, all fictional, but he does represent that counterpart to Indy of, you know, the very geeky historian knowing a lot,
Mhm.
but going to the other side. You know, so in a way, he is Indy just going to the other side. And that was a very, very brilliant person to put him up against.
Yes, and they have that fantastic conversation in the bar in
Yeah.
Cairo where actually I think Belloc makes a good point, even though Indy doesn't want to hear it, that, you know, really it's not there's not that many degrees of separation between you and me. And
And again, that total balance of what are we chasing? Are we chasing immortality? Are we chasing a relic? Are we chasing freedom? What are we chasing and why? You know, why are we doing this?
yeah, and Belloc, I get the feeling that he has enough self-knowledge to, I mean, he does, to know that he's a bit of a bad guy. And I find it fascinating that his big excitement about the Ark is like, Indy, it's a transmitter to enable you to talk to God. And I think, are you sure you really want to do that? You know,
What
just in your the state of your career at the moment, are you sure this is a fantastic idea? But I suppose again, it's probably the thrill of discovery. You know,
Yes,
we all want
yes,
to gaze. You know, whether we would express it that way or not. Most of us, I think, want to gaze upon the face of the Almighty, if only because we're incredibly curious. And
yes, yes. And I think also what they're doing brilliantly, and Indy has this as well, and as that flawed hero that he himself cannot really look away. You know, when he's facing something, yeah, he knows when to close his eyes, but he cannot really stop searching. And actually, Elsa is having that brilliant comment as well, where she's saying, just as your father, Gidley as a schoolboy, you know, because that's
yes,
excitement.
yeah,
That
yeah, and they do a brilliant. I love it when they do amazing things with very little dialogue. That nod to it at the end of Holy Grail, where Indy's already lost Elsa because she can't let the Grail go, and and he's going through the same thing with, oh wait a minute, just let me, I can get it, I can get it, and his dad does the best thing ever, where he just calls him by not his nickname,
But
just to
that's
get
the
his
first,
attention.
it's the first time we hear him do that. He has been
Yeah,
Julia up until then, and then he goes Indiana for the first time.
yeah. And I find that such a wonderful scene because
Yeah,
not only does he bring Indy back from the precipice, but it's also such a pivotal moment for his character because after his lifelong obsession with
yes,
this one artifact, he's the one who says, just let it go.
yeah,
And
yeah. And it's
yeah.
wonderful, as you say, that he's the one who's saying it. That, you know, Indy is actually in that moment caught up in that same kind of desire as we've just seen Ilsa. And he's so close to reaching it, you know. And then the father just go, no, 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 let it go, let it go.
Yeah.
And the way he's saying it is just brilliant. And then also outside when they are, this was Petra, of course, filmed at lovely Petra. And what a facade that is. That must look lovely. I really want to go and see that someday. But where he's going, what did you find, Dad? Or what did you discover, Dad? And that's a brilliant question to end with as well.
Mm.
What actually did you find, you know?
Yeah. And
Uh,
and of course the very deep answer comes when he says illumination. There's yeah, again the storytelling and the script writing, they did so well with simple, deep dialogue. Uh, and of course humor. I know there's funny moments in all three films. I think Last Crusade, they got the perfect balance of
yeah, yeah.
humor and everything
And
else.
characters and everything coming together. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was wonderfully, wonderfully done. Good Lord, where do you meander from something deep like that?
Well,
Uh,
actually, there was one confession I'm gonna make, Andrew, because you and I talked about. I think you and I have both of us watched the Crystal Skull, which is the fourth Indiana Jones movie. I confess I haven't watched the Dial of Destiny, and I feel a bit like I should, but I haven't yet. But we do know they exist, guys. Just to let you know that we've just chosen not to acknowledge them in this one because we really love the first three ones. But there's
I
one,
don't know what you mean, Jane. I thought for a second, I must have misunderstood. For a second, I thought you were saying there's more than three Indiana
of
Jones
course
movies.
there aren't, of course there
I
aren't, of
know,
course there aren't. But I do have one confession, Andrew, because after these first three ones, I rather enjoyed, I think it must have been in my late teenage years, maybe early 20s, this huge TV series, again, George Lucas produced it, I think, with Young Indiana Jones Chronicles came out. And I think a young Sean Patrick Flannery is playing Indy in those. And a very brief appearance by Harrison Ford in one of them, who's sort of looking back at his young life. I gotta confess, I loved those. I actually think they were good. Um, it was a very long, they ran for a long time and they were very long. They were like an hour and a half or something. They were like 90-minute long. And we follow Indy as a child and as a young man. And my God, does he meet an awful lot of historical people along the way. He certainly
Oh,
knows how to be in the right place at the right time. And it was more subtle in terms of action. It was more educational in a way, and maybe that was why I liked them. We see a lot of historical people. Of course, again, what Indy is doing is all fictional, but there are a lot of historical events going on, from wars to politicians to religious people, artists, writers, and so on. And I actually did enjoy them as a teenager, I remember. So I just want to put that out there. Just a tiny confession. I did really enjoy those.
it's something to be hugely proud of, and you're in very good company because I have something to show you. Bear with me.
Oh, oh, I feel a confession coming up. What's happening? Oh, this is exciting. I wonder what this is. Is there something you haven't told me, Andrew?
Thanks for waiting. So, among my prized possessions are the collected works of Young Indiana Jones, Volume 1, which takes him up to just before the First World War.
Yep.
Volume 2, The War Years, and Volume 3, the interwar period, basically taking him up to the movies. So you are in very good company. I watched them too when I was a young teenager, and I loved them so much that as soon as I became an adult with disposable income to burn, I hunted down the DVD box sets and got them because you're absolutely right. They're amazing. The historical characters are 9 times out of 10 presented in a really educational way. As a school kid, you could almost write essays off these episodes.
You actually could.
Um,
I probably
yeah,
could.
and I liked how Indy, as you say, his role is often very understated. So he
Yep.
doesn't action hero his way in and save the day. In fact, what impressed me during the war years is in the First World War, the hard punching Indy that we know in the movies. He doesn't exist so much, and it's actually his friend, his Belgian friend Remy,
Yes.
who often gets him out of scrapes that he can't handle himself. And I
He's
like that because you can see how he develops into the
yes,
indie that we know and love.
exactly.
But he's not Superman from the beginning. He has to learn. And I'll ask you the same question in a second, but favorite episode. I love the really sweet romantic one where they're in Vienna and he falls in love with the Habsburg princess. And he's only a little boy, it's a crush. And I love the scene where he's hanging on to the palace gates, demanding to be let in so he can see Princess Sophie. And there's this very flustered
And
guard who's not entirely.
she's the one in his medallion in
He is, yes.
yes.
Yeah, and this poor Austrian palace guard decides he's not going to shoot the crazy little American boy and instead rings through. And of course, it creates huge problems for Henry Jones because he's on the ambassador's staff at that time, and of course, his boss has massive, massive words with him in the aftermath of this. But yes,
Oh,
good old Indy. You follow your heart, boy. You do it. You have to take on an empire to see the girl you love.
isn't
You
that
do
isn't
it.
that the episode as well where he's introduced to Sigmund Freud?
Yes, because he asked the very pertinent question at dinner time, what is love? And
Yes,
I think
I
it's
remember there.
Yeah, yeah, and Freud comes up with the straightforward. Well, actually, it's basically down to sex and biology, and I think I can't remember who Freud is talking to. Is another major
Yes,
philosopher who does not agree with him, and they end up having this massive quarrel
yes.
with Indy, sort of looking at the two
Yeah, look,
of them.
that's a fantastic scene as well. It is a really, really good episode. It was that one. I don't know if you're aware of this, but it was directed by a Danish film director called Bille August,
Ah,
who's quite famous. And I remember that only because I think I skipped a couple of episodes to get to this one because I wanted to see what he'd done with that one. But that was a really, really good one. I think the little girl who plays Sophie, the princess, is actually a Danish actor as well. She hasn't really made much of a name of herself later on, um, but she has a little bit of a sort of Austrian accent thing going on, or it's meant to, I think. And India is struggling having a conversation with her, but she does speak a little bit of English. So but that first love is a very and powerful one, as we get to
yeah,
see.
yeah.
It's really
He carries the medallion for a very long time. I think the last time I see him wear it or look at it or talk about it in an episode is one of the ones set in the 1920s. So he never really lets go of that one, which is incredibly sweet. And
You're right. That's a fantastic episode. Oh, there's so many I loved because you meet everyone from politicians to religious leaders to Mata Hari at one point to all
yeah,
writers. And there was one episode I confess I keep returning to, and I think it's because it's one of the few that actually displays the horror of the bunker war that was the First World War, which is the episode in Verdun.
yes,
Um, I, I, we don't see much of Remy, I think, in that one because he's mainly in the infirmary. He's wounded or something. I cannot. I think he's been shot. I think he's been. I cannot.
yeah.
Um, but that whole Indy ends up being a career at one point and goes back and forth, and he ends up destroying an order at one point, and a lot of men lived a day longer, and that's the poignant thing about that scene. But that complete insanity
Hmm.
of disrespect for human life, which that war was all about at the end of the day. And there's one point he has this brilliant discussion with some of his mates. They're sitting having something to eat, and they're trying to figure out what's this war about. And there
Oh,
was
with the sausages and the bread, making the map and going like, no,
no,
well,
no, no. When the Archduke of and so on and so on, and so Prussia joined, and that happened, and that happened, and they sort of sit there going, "So are we fighting to protect Serbia? But we're in France. What happened to Why did Belgium? What happened? What And there's no sense to this madness at all. And it was done
hmm.
really well. I think it was done brilliantly in that one, and also that entire they're saying goodbye, and there is one of the soldiers there giving him a letter to his wife, and he says her name is such and such, she live in I think Marseille or wherever, and take this to her. And he goes, no, no, I can't, and he's over the top, and away he goes. And there were so many sub stories told within that episode of so many people's lives. We also at one point follow that young French lieutenant, I think, who's being promoted to lieutenant, and he has to lead this troop of Belgians because India has joined the Belgium army under the name Défense. And he doesn't really want to lead them, but he kind of has to. He's in a way teaching India a lot about leadership in that episode. But I don't know if it's my favorite episode because there's so many brilliant ones, but I just return to that every single time because I think it was so brilliantly done. Just the madness of that situation.
Yes, and what they achieved on a very limited budget compared to what they had for the movies. It looked amazing in the 90s when I first watched it on television. It still looks amazing now. It wouldn't, disgrace modern cinema at all. And because I was thinking, funnily enough, when I was watching the most recent iteration of All Quiet on the Western Front, the first thing I thought of comparatively was young Indiana Jones and his involvement in that theater of war. And actually, how well that those episodes had aged, all his First World War adventures. But yes, the Verdun one sticks out very strongly. There is another one that came a bit after that, where he gets posted away from one form of madness to another form of madness, and he goes to the Belgian Congo.
Oh,
And
yes.
so
The
his,
Dr. Schweitzer, what's his name? No, what's his name?
oh
Albert.
yes, yes, the German doctor, the
Yes,
the doctor of Gabarene, who yes, yes, and that is one of my favorite episodes
I
ever.
love that as well.
Yeah, and it's such a beautiful contrast because you get this wonderful warmth and love of humanity bumping right up against the realities of this hideous conflict that people don't. A lot of the participants, as you say, they don't fully understand what it's about, and it's such a it's although we know India has been to Africa before, it really broadens him because he
Yeah.
he talks to the doctor. I remember about how the local tribes people have a compensation
Oh,
system
that's
to go to
fantastic
war.
scene.
And,
Yeah,
so one man is worth three chickens
yeah.
or whatever. And he goes, that's absolutely barbaric. And then the doctor says, well, a year ago, the French and the Germans had a battle that claimed the lives of 20,000 men. And when I told the local chief this, he looked shocked, and then he said the kings of these nations or the chiefs of these nations must be very rich men because the amount of chickens you'd have to hand over for that kind of number. So who really is the uncivilized people here? It's
Also, that it's again that brilliant question of how do you put value on a human life?
yeah,
At least they put some form of value on it. If I had killed one of your best warriors, I kind of have to compensate you. So at
yeah.
least I put some form of value on human life. When you are in a trench war, what kind of value is that?
Well, that's it. You just you have a very distant strategic goal, and all these poor guys are just disposables towards that end, and that's truly horrific.
And then you gain like 2 meters of land, and that's what you've gained today. Congratulations,
Yeah.
that cost you 30,000 men.
Yeah, and I like how they don't so much give you the German side at Verdun, but I did love that brief exchange between Petain and General Nivelle, where
Yes.
Petain looks at his map and he goes, "No, no, no, if you want to do this, you must plan this down to the last millimeter." And then Nivelle just goes, "Oh no, it'll be fine. I've decided we're going to do this." And which is actually quite a fairly realistic portrayal of both of them. I mean, Nivelle was a bit brighter than they made him out in that episode, but they needed him to be that stereotypical kind of
But you also
careless.
later on, you're so right, because you also later on get the impression just of how much of a pressure he was under when he goes, "What would you have done then?"
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, yes. Because of course, and the case with all of them, their masters in their respective capital
Yeah.
cities are saying, "What are you doing? We need to move forward." And it's like, well, I'm trying. It's just this situation's just not quite how we thought it would turn out, and we're trying to figure out how to break through all this. And
And that
yes,
complete detachment, from what's actually going on out there. When he goes, "How much land did we gain?" None, sir.
yeah, yeah. We just that we'll build up for the next try. And I do love how, although it's never stated, when you finally get through all of those experience and you come back to the Indiana Jones of the 1930s, you can see why he detests Nazis so much because these people who are arming to the teeth and who are clearly intent on starting all this nonsense again. You could go, oh no, no, I lived through that. Never mind what other ideological rubbish you're bringing with you. The mere fact that you guys want to put us all through this
Yeah.
again is
You know,
It,
another character, Andrew, that I gained a lot of a lot of sympathy for when watching these Chronicles were his father. Because if you have such a brilliant young child, and he was clearly a very intelligent young child, and he's going through all of this, I mean, for God's sake, go back to school.
yes, yeah. What are you doing? It's I mean, yes, incredibly valuable experiences round the world, but what the heck, Indy? Because he's quite young when he leaves home to start adventuring, isn't he? And he basically just never stops. So I almost wonder where he found time for his degree, really.
Where did that fit in? Yeah,
Yeah.
you're
Did you just
right.
knock on Professor Ravenwood's door in Chicago one day and go, "Hi, I've just traveled the world and now I'd like to study archaeology. Can I sign on?"
Could I maybe do this? Yeah, no, you're so right. You're so right. But it does. I think they do give a lot of background information into those characters and how that you can totally see him growing into Harrison Ford there.
Oh yes, yes, and beautifully cast the young
Yes.
Indiana Jones series. The personalities as portrayed are wonderful, and you can see the connectivity. I'm actually surprised that they don't routinely rebroadcast the young Indiana Jones series because people are missing out. They really are.
Really good, and you're so right about the educational element there, Andrew. Because if you, it's not possible, but if you disregard the indie character, there's a huge amount of education in these, and I actually think that it definitely shaped some of my learning about especially the time around the First World War. Um,
Yeah.
these kind of films, because I hadn't really pictured the trench war. You read about it and you write essays about it, but you don't really picture it in your mind as such.
No,
All of those
no.
soldiers are just numbers, so and so many lost their lives there, and so many lost their lives there, but it's just numbers.
Yeah, it takes something like that to bring it back to sort of really make one appreciate the terrible reality, and I think that's why it's so important that people do produce dramas like that, because although you can never quite well, thank goodness you can never capture the full horror of what it was like, but it's a very stern reminder to people, and again, I love that Indy is largely he's a participant, but he's also an observer, not an influencer.
Yeah,
And
very much. That I think they did that brilliantly in the script as well. That he's impacting some things, but not, the course of history.
yes, yes, his time, of course, will come later. I mean, my favorite what if, and I think there was a spoof website that actually postulated this. That moment in Last Crusade where the crowd accidentally buffets him into Hitler, and there's that awkward moment he gets the diary autograph. I just thought, in that split second, Indy, did you do a little risk assessment and think, I could just pull my gun out and shoot him right now, right this? I mean, I won't survive, but I will have just rid the world of Adolf Hitler. Is it worth it? But I'm obviously the rest of the plot has to happen. So, and I suppose the rest of human history
Yes, yes, that's the thing.
too. So,
Because this was what, 38, 39, right? He could have saved a
yeah,
lot of people.
yeah. I know. Yes, you could have. Or you might have saved a lot of lives, or it might have gone worse. You never know. It's
That's actually a good point. Perhaps it would have all gotten worse. Yes. You never
Yeah,
know. You
but
never know.
and actually, I am glad because I like him as a character. Because I've no doubt that if Indy had shot Hitler, he would have died himself
Yes.
fractions of seconds later.
Oh yes. Oh yes. There is actually again that it's that balance with Elsa as well, where she's standing there watching all of that happening, and she's just crying a little bit because she doesn't really like the burning of books happening.
Oh,
There is something in, people who are well educated just don't burn books, don't destroy books. We cannot get rid of books. It's just not they're the
in
Holy Grail.
in all the three films, I find that hardest to watch.
Yes.
And part of the reason I find it hard to watch is because it really happened and it's so beautifully captured because I just and I think Indy has a very cold look on his face too because I think he's thinking similar thoughts to Elsa in that moment. It's just the enthusiasm with which so many people are destroying culture and learning. And that's what I find most frightening about that scene, how easy it is for people to fall into that particular pit.
Yeah.
And again, yeah, it's not a long scene, but it's so powerful.
Powerful. And it,
Yeah,
again, as you say, that scene could have happened. That scene could have been, almost like a documentary.
yeah.
As you say, that joy and the enthusiasm of destroying something that is learning and maybe actually could teach you something. Sean Connery has probably one of the most brilliant lines later in the film where he goes, maybe that Nazis should start reading books instead of burning them.
Oh yes, yeah. That's yeah.
That just sums it up, doesn't it? You might not like what you read, but maybe learn from what
Yeah.
you read instead of destroying it, because it's not going to go away just because you destroy it.
Yes, yeah, and there's that very gentle reinforcement with the whole the pen is mightier than the sword.
Oh, Marcus.
Bless him.
That's the first actual fight that Henry Jones Sr. is in, isn't it?
Oh, it is. Yeah, he's a very for his age. And I know it's Sean Connery who has beaten his way through many other films before, but he was getting on a bit when they made that one. So I'm glad they toned down what he had to get through. I did feel for him when he was being dragged along the tank tracks for a bit. That was
Yes.
you get a sympathetic wince from his. Oh, wow, that's not very. Yeah.
Actually, another stroke of genius is that scene where the tank goes over the edge. Um, and there's that brief nanosecond where he thinks he's lost his son.
Yes.
Just
Yeah.
one moment, and then he realizes he's still there, and he'll go, "Oh yeah," and he just sort of go, "Oh yeah, okay, good, let's move on then."
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it's beautiful, and it's their whole relationship. That the mask has slipped for a second. Yeah, and it's a pity. I don't think Indy actually hears anything that he says to
No,
Marcus. So
no.
yeah, I do like that he gets his hat back as well. So
Yes.
that puff of breeze, and he gets his fedora.
Oh, the hat. The hat is in a lot of scenes. Also in the Temple of Doom. He's nearly losing it in that the spike coming up of the ground kind of scene, and he just manages to reach in and goes, "My
Oh
hat."
yes, yeah, can't lose my hat, and it's such a thing. I like that Short Round actually saves his clothes for him. It's like, got your hat, Dr. Jones.
Oh, he's very sweet as well. That boy, he's really sweet as well. But
Yeah.
I think the characters around him are probably weakest in Temple of Doom. They're best definitely in Raiders of the Lost Ark and the Last Crusade somehow because they're sort of more independent and they function on their own.
Yeah, yeah. Short Round was a great character, and I would have loved to have seen him in another
Yeah.
if there'd been another opportunity. But they're never you're never given much time to flesh out the relationship that he has with India. And I know you're verbally given the background. Oh, yeah, his parents were killed by the Japanese bombing, and I've found him, and but although he played, I mean, gotta hand it to the actors. It's so young, he played that beautifully. But yes, and Willie just seems to spend a lot of her time screaming.
The
It's
problem with her is the noise.
yeah, she's quite piercing, isn't it? You can tell she's a
Completely
singer. She's
surrounded.
got that range.
Well, that's why they call it a jungle, sweetheart.
I do like it when they do give her her moments though, like when
Yeah.
she's so fed up with the elephant's trunk, she just grabs the snake and goes, "I said, cut it out!" And there's Indy going, "Ah, snake."
There's this brief moment where you can tell he's just going, okay, it's not worth telling her about this. No, not worth
Oh
telling.
no. Yeah, poor Willie. Again, I mean, with a bit more fleshing out and maybe a protagonist if there'd ever been an opportunity in another film. But no, we sadly she vanishes and we never see her again after Temple of Doom. But yeah, much weaker as a character than the other two. And
He did a
yeah,
good job
shame.
of it, but I think as a character, I think as a character, we do like to see Indy back with Marion because she was kind of the first one. But I think you're right that Ilsa actually as a character was probably a lot stronger because she's constantly in and out of this. Can we trust her? Can we not trust her? Kind of.
Yeah.
And that's a real tension to give to your audience.
Yes, and she comes across as very warm and human sometimes, and at other times she's completely chilled because you do see her in vulnerable moments when she is genuinely afraid, or it must be said, does show some concern for Indy. Although again, you never know whether that's fake or real. Um, and then there's the utterly cold moments, like just before Donovan's death, and all the other bits. Yeah, I was always a bit. I used to wonder about the last kiss with Indy before she goes, but before I lost it in the humor of it. And this is how we say goodbye in Germany.
Yes.
I
But there was
think
an
for the
intensity in that kiss
Australian.
that maybe spoke of something more than that. But and then
Yeah.
she sort of she because she's bending over him and then she gets up again and she has that sly smile again on her face,
Yeah.
that against her, it tells you, you never quite know about her, you know.
No, no, I think it was Alison Doody who played her. I think she would
Yes,
really enjoyed that role. And it was a wonderful role to have.
fantastic.
Yeah.
She was fantastic. And I remember watching a documentary. She was quite young when she got it.
Mm,
She was only in her early 20s, I think, when she got it.
yeah.
Really young. But no, she did such a great job of that role. That was amazing, that. And actually, I gotta say to some of the villains as well, some of those, we don't see them a lot, but some of those plain Nazis in sort of the semi roles there, they were actually quite good. They do give some life to them. Even the man with the hand, the one we can't remember his
I
name.
know I keep wanting to call him Herr Flick, but I know that's wrong because
That's,
he's
yeah,
from
I mean,
below
you're
alone. But
right. He does look like him. You're right.
yeah,
Yes.
see, I'm comfortable saying this to Gestapo guys. Like you all look alike to me. It's the storm coats and, and black
You're
hats.
right. He does look like a flick. He does.
Yeah, and he just plays the most wonderfully intense creep.
Yes.
It's just the shallow breathing. No, Fräulein, we're not thirsty. And it's like, oh my God, where do they find people like you?
And that whole thing with the coat, with the coat he's putting on,
Oh,
and you just go, what kind of instrument does he have there? That's not good. And he's just
yeah.
got coat. Yeah, okay. What?
That really got me. The first time I ever watched Raiders of the Lost Ark, I honestly thought he was going to start torturing her right in front of everyone. Then he just hangs his coat up. You're like, oh, okay.
That's the worst kind of torture ever. It's that. Oh God, yeah, no, so many funny moments there. Funny moments. Andrew, I'm actually thinking because we have planned this should be the first part of two because we're doing all three indie movies and there's a
Yeah.
lot to unpack. So we are planning, guys, on a bit of a surprise for the second part of this. We're not going to say anything more right now, but we hope to have a great surprise for you in the second part of this. And as always, join in again. And let us know your comments and everything. And Andrew, how should we wrap this up now?
I think given as a nod to both the popular pulp fiction of the 30s, I and indeed the Indiana Jones franchise, we should end it on a bit of a cliffhanger and just go with a to be continued dot dot dot.
I like how you're
Um,
selling this.
yes, but as for a sign off, I don't know. Is there a great line from the any of the movies that could be a sort of until next time or
Well,
unless
maybe I'll buy you a drink.
yes, I would certainly look forward to that. Yeah, somehow Donovan's warning to Indy to not trust anyone
Yes, that
uh,
that's a good
doesn't
one as
really
well.
fit, or does
Doesn't
it?
really fit in, but it is a good line. It is a good line. It's a very, very good line. Maybe don't cross the shields.
Don't cross the shield, is it? Yes.
Shield, never cross the shield. But yeah, let us know, guys. What's a good cliffhanger?
Yeah.
Well, we are planning on coming back to Indy because there's too much to unpack, and we couldn't decide on how to do this, if we should do one movie at a time. And then we kind of decided, no, let's just talk about all three of them because they kind of linked in so many ways and refer to each other. So we couldn't really figure out how to do that. But we're going to do a second part. Definitely we are.
We are indeed. We've got so much more we'd like to say. And actually, if you guys would like to, because you've been listening very patiently to us as always, suggest stuff. If you have burning thoughts, questions about the three Indiana Jones movies and the Magnificent Young Indiana Jones series, then please do put them in, and we'll put them in as discussion points and happily take them up. Worst case scenario, we'll go, oh, I'd never even heard of that. Sorry, but we'll still put it out there. So please
Absolutely.
do comment.
That's a brilliant point. Absolutely. Please do comment, questions, everything. We would love to. And we hope to be back with an even better part two, Andrew, of Indiana
Absolutely,
Jones
yes.
Adventures. Take care until then, guys, and thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you very much, everyone. And thank you so much, Jane. It's been really awesome, as always.
As always, Andrew, see you next time.
You too. Bye.
That belongs in a museum.